Hey guys, and welcome to another painting tutorial. This time we are doing a how to do detail, how to add depth, and how to use broken pieces, whether it's a 3D printed part or if one of your figures falls off the shelf and snaps or breaks somewhere, how you can still use them in your collection. So as you can see on this torso, we have a lot of definition. We've also got this massive hole. Now this is courteous of Dusk Till Dawn Studios. I asked them to send me some broken pieces for reasons like this. It also has a few little print marks just down the bottom of the toga. So, let's get to it. To begin with, we are going to base the flesh. So to use this, I'm using Kislev flesh from Citadel, and I've got a Vallejo white. You can pretty much use any white. I think this is called Pure Blanco or something. But we are just going to go over all the skin like this. Now, I don't own an airbrush, so I have to do everything by hand. I would love an airbrush, but they're expensive. So if you are a mere mortal like me and have to use a brush, just slap it on. Now, one thing I will say is I find when using one of these type of brushes, it takes a lot longer and it can be a bit blotchy. So my favourite thing to do is to use these rounded dry brushes, which I'll show you in 1 second. Here we go. Now, you've probably seen this type of brush before. I find this not only helps you paint the thing a lot quicker, it also makes the base and just anything you do so much smoother. I would always use one of these brushes to paint with. I think they're so much better than just using a generic normal brush. So if you're doing any sort of base coats or anything like this and you have these rounded tip dry brushes, give this a go. I really do think it will change how you do your base coats and any other little details like this. I cannot stress enough how much better I think it is to paint with these rounded tip ones like this. Now we're going to spread all that paint around that we put on. We will be doing 2 very thin coats for this flesh, because I'd rather have 2 coats to build up the colour than one really blotchy thing. And of course, take time for this. This isn't the piece I'm going to be using, because I don't really have any sort of toga-wearing characters, or any use for a toga-wearing character at the moment. I don't have any like Greek mythology figures. So this is just a piece that I'm just going to very quickly do my base coat on. Just slap it over, cover as much as possible. We're going to do the same for the toga, so we're going to cover the toga in white. This was all primed with a grey sear, just because I find if you use a black for certain colours, that the colour doesn't really show through properly when you put another one on top. For example, the white would take a lot longer to apply, the skin tone would take longer to apply and be a lot darker. So this is what it looks like after we've done 2 thin coats of Kislev flesh, as well as a thin coat of the Pure Blanco white from Vallejo. Now, adding depth is super easy. I use Citadel shades, I think they're amazing. These things are generally amazing. And Larmium Medium is a secret weapon, I promise you. So, a lot of people will just go straight into the shade and put it all over the part, miniature, whatever. Nothing wrong with that, depending on how strong you want it. For example, this is a very, very strong orange shade. So the plan for me, and you've probably seen me do this a few times, is we're going to thin it down with Larmium Medium. Now, Larmium Medium is essentially a clear paint. Now, make sure if you're going to use this, make sure you rinse your brush off thoroughly, because you will contaminate the Larmium, and then whatever you use on next will have hints of that previous colour. I really don't want an orange Larmium Medium. So we thinned it down. This works just as well as water, it's just I find this is a lot better for applying. Now when I do this, I will always put the shade over any grooves or whatnot. So for example, in the abs here, and you can see the shade just falling into it. Now just be careful of pooling, but I will give the whole miniature coverage in this to make it even. Now that's why I use the Larmium Medium, because then it's not a bright, I say bright, it's not a very dark orange, which you'll see as we've cut here. You can see how the flat parts have a very just like normal looking colour to them, whereas the recesses have that deep orange. Now Agrax is something you've seen me use multiple times ago. We are going to put this all over the toga, and we're going to do the exact same thing. But with this, I'm going to show you the difference between thinning it down and not. So there is the Larmium being applied on the palette, so we can mix it together nicely. We're just going to bring the Larmium into the Agrax like such, to make this thinner brown shade. So let's pop that through. Get as much shade off as possible, because we want as little on the brush to begin with, so it's more controlled. Alright, let's apply it. So using shades like this, as you can see on the toga we do have these ridges here. Using the shade allows us to fill these in nicely. So for example, if you painted the trim gold instead of white like we have, putting the orange shade we just used would make the gold pop a little bit more. Putting the agrax over will give it some dirt and depth into the gold on this part. And obviously the more shade you use, the more it's going to fill in the like recesses of the figure. And that's a good thing to remember when it comes to doing all the other parts. For example, if we would put that much shade into the abs themselves would be extremely dark, almost blotchy, as opposed to having definition, it would just look thick and gloopy. For something like this, showing how it works, I don't think it's a bad thing. Because it adds a bit of depth to it, which we need. So that's on the actual trim of the toga, but when it comes to doing the actual toga itself, there will be, we'll call them grooves, which will be from where the toga is like folded up, just it. Now I will just run this in there as well, and this will just add almost like a shadow to it. If you wanted to make it dirtier, you could put this on with a rounded dry brush like we did the base coat with, and sort of go all over, and it would add sort of like a dirt effect to it. As you can see there, you can already see the shade just filling into the recesses of the toga, just adding some depth from where it's all folded up. And because we're using the brown, it will also add the dirt, like I said, so it's sort of a 2-for-1. Almost like it's not a crisp royal toga anymore, it's got some wear and tear to it. I don't think there'd be many other. You could put maybe Newlin oil through if you thin that down, which give you sort of, it's like a black wash. But there's not many others you could use. Maybe a dark blue. It'd have to be super dark, I'd imagine. Oh, it's just going to look a bit cartoonish, depending on what you're aiming for. Yeah, we're just going to go down all these little grooves. Every fold, just like so. You'll see I've avoided using the big dark area. And then when we do, we're going to mix it in a bit more, just to make sure there's no separation. As you see here, that's what happens when you put it on a bit too thick. Or not too thick, but thicker than it was. You'll see that colour is instantly darker than before. So now I want to show you what happens if you just put it straight out top, which is something you can do. I've done it before for certain things. For example, I made Shell from Dragon Age, and I put the wash straight out the tub over, because that was a darker figure. It was all rock based. That needed some extra high dirt. On something like this though, you'll see how it is. So we've got these grooves just in the top of the corner here. So we're going to let all this dry, and then you'll see the difference between how it looks. Okay, now that it's dried, you can see in the folds, got this nice shadowy dirt going on. When we put it straight on top, it's changed the white completely. So that is something to be careful of. And the same with here, where we've not mixed in properly, if we use the lamy medium, you've seen how there's almost a separation of colour. Just something to be wary of. Much like dry brushing, you could overtake the colour that you've put down. Next up, I want to show you how you can add some simple definition to your pieces. Now, this is something I was very scared of for a very long time. To do this, I'm going to use a very, very, very pale skin tone. And this isn't the colour we will finish with, but this is just to let the camera pick up there where we're going to paint. For example, we're going to do the veins here. I say they're veins, not really veins. I'm not sure what the medical name of it is. But they're risen up, so we're going to do them. We're going to do across the chest here. We will do down the neck, as you saw. And we're basically looking for any parts of the human body, or in whichever part you do. For example, you can do this on togas, where the sun would catch because they're raised up beyond a flat surface. So for example, the abs here, because our dude is just ripped. So that you can see is where we're going to map out. Now, for this, I have mixed Kislev flesh, and I put a very little bit of the other pale skin tone in. And we're just going to basically copy what we did, but I'm going to show you what it looks like when you do it properly. Now, you can see we're following the definition here. So we're going up here in a straight line. And you can just see how the colour, while it's still close to what it was, you can see it's a bit brighter, and that just helps the features of the 3D print, or whatever you're reprinting, or sorry, repainting, just give it a bit of depth, a bit of pop. And this was, like I said, this was something I was very, very worried about doing. Took me a very long time and a lot of patience to give it a go, but it's not quite as hard or bad as it seems. You literally just want to hit any raised edge. And sometimes it won't look as good, and that's okay, you can undo that. That's not a problem. Again, we're going to go over the abs as well. Add some definition, because like I said, our dude is ripped. He's been eating his 5 a day. Get all of them. And then there's just some raised edges just where the arm would connect. So we're going to pop a little bit of definition on there as well in a second. And yeah. Make sure we've covered everything on this section just to show you. Like such. You can see how when the light catches it's just a little bit lighter, and that's what you want. So we're going to finish it off. We're going to do these little edges here, which will just connect to the arm. Just to give this some definition as well, so it's not just all one blocky colour. And there we go. We'll let that dry. Okay. Now once that's done, again, like I said, you can do that on fabric as well. We're just going to go over some of these toga, where the white would need to be back to being a pure white. So any raised edges here as well. Because like I said, sometimes when you do a wash, it will take over the original colour. A bit like if you do too heavy of a dry brush. So like I said, that's easily fixable. Just go back in, just hit the edge with a white, and you can see instantly the change in definition. And you just want to finish it off wherever you can. So let's let that dry. And that is how it's looking now. It's fully dry, and you can see the definition. So next I want to show you how you can use broken pieces. Now we've all been there, we've all had a figure fall off the shelf and break, and it feels like the end of the world because, oh, I've got to buy a new one, what am I going to do with this now? It's going to go in the bin. Doesn't have to. Let's be inventive. For example, I've got a giant hole in the torso here. Well, he's been stabbed. Now if I wanted to, I could put this on a diorama piece. I could just have it on display with someone stabbing him through the chest if I could find the head. Whatever. But to do this, we're going to use magic, which is Blood for the Blood Gods by Citadel. Now you would have seen this if you've done my vampire video. We are going to splodge this on. Now, when we last did it, we did this technique as well, where we splodged on, and we're going to hit these print areas here. Almost to make it look like guts or something are hanging out. But just like that. And the red of this is really going to change the toga and add some depth. We're going to go a bit in, because obviously when you get stabbed in the chest, I would assume there's a lot of blood pooling where the hole is. So, let's get some more paint on here. We're going to bloody up that hole. We're literally going to paint it in, just like this. There we go. And that way, if you look into it, it should just be a solid red throughout, and it can look like there's actually more inside than just a giant hole. So that is that. But when using this paint, there is another technique you can do if you want a nice blood splatter. Get a firm brush like this. Dab some paint on it. Now this is messy and sticky. I will warn you now. But get a brush like this. And you're just going to flick it. As easy as that. You're going to get this natural looking blood splatter. Just like that. Put this on your figures who are butchers. Doesn't have to be a broken dead character. It could be a butcher who goes around murdering everyone. Has blood all over their armor. That's how you could achieve that effect. So that is how you use a broken piece and how you can change up your display a little bit. I can put this on a diorama, I can have it in display now, and it's gone from being a wasted piece that's going into the bin to something that can be used in the collection. Now I hope this has helped. If it has, in helping you just doing detailing and some depth to your figures, then please drop me a like. It would help me amazingly. If you're new and you're not subscribed but you'd like to, that'd also be amazing. And hopefully guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.